Well, first off, thank you so much for having me and for this visit. I'm really excited to meet everyone here and really looking forward to this opportunity to present my research. My name is Cameron Verhaal. I am an associate professor of strategy and entrepreneurship at Tulane University in the beautiful city of New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm also the Albert Lepage Professor of Business there. My research involves, I would say, growth and competitive dynamics of craft-based firms or cultural production markets, ones where identity claims resonate with consumers. I'm particularly interested in authenticity in those markets and what happens to authenticity claims when growth and success may actually undermine the validity of those claims, something that I sometimes call the authenticity paradox. I also do work on stigma, organizational stigma, identity-related issues, as well as political polarization. So basically all sorts of different social dynamics that impact the construction and operation of efficient markets. So I've always been interested in craft-based markets. I did my undergrad at the University of Colorado at Boulder. That's a place that's really well known for craft beer in particular, but also organic foods and outdoor products and those types of things. So I've always had an interest in those types of markets, but I actually didn't start my PhD program studying or doing research on craft-based firms. I actually started the PhD program in international business, transaction cost economics, political risk. A lot of my background before the PhD program was in those areas. And after 2 years in the PhD program, for a number of different reasons, I made a complete switch to organization theory, which put me back a little bit in terms of my PhD studies. But I think it was a good decision in the end. It's something that I'm absolutely fascinated by. This paradox, this dynamic of growth in these markets can actually undermine what makes you successful in the first place. And if we think about it, these types of companies and organizations are all around us. They make up a huge portion of the companies and the markets and the organizations that we interact with on a daily basis. And so I just think it's a fascinating context to study. I'm particularly interested now in, I think that there has been an assumption in the authenticity literature that authenticity is universally good. It's a good thing. Being authentic is good, and I would agree with that. But increasingly, I've been moving towards, me and a number of other people, I'm not the only one, into the limitations of authenticity. When do authenticity claims break down? How do organizations become perceived as inauthentic? And once they are inauthentic, can they overcome those inauthenticity claims? As I mentioned before, to the constraints of growth. Additionally, when you make authenticity claims, sometimes, for better or worse, you're tied to those authenticity claims. You can't have a do-over. You can't go back and say, oh, well, now I'm a different person, I'm a different company. Once you make those claims and you wear that hat, it's something that sticks with you, and you have to live with that for better or for worse, I think, in a lot of situations. So I'm increasingly interested in probing and testing those boundaries of authenticity versus inauthenticity, benefits versus penalties associated with authenticity, and how that might inform what we already know about the authenticity literature. So that's a really difficult question because there's so many different layers to it. But it's a very important question. I actually think understanding the review process, navigating the review process, picking the journals, understanding how to respond to reviewers based on which type of journal is a really underappreciated skill in our profession. So it's very important. Sometimes it's just obvious where the paper should go, based on the type of paper it is, based on the methodologies utilized, based on the theories. But I find that to be less the case. It's very seldom that I know exactly where to send a journal article. What I like to think about is where the conversation's happening that I want to be a part of. That's one aspect of it. As I've advanced in my career, I also think about what would benefit the junior scholars on the paper. Now I'm not a senior scholar, but I'm sort of mid-career, and so are there certain journals that would benefit the more junior faculty member on the paper? That would be sort of one motivation. Obviously, the status of the journal, the reputation of the journal is important, but it's not the only deciding factor. I think that, at the end of the day, it's extremely difficult to publish in our field. The acceptance rates are increasingly low, and so I think, I would personally recommend taking a more open or more broad approach to getting your work out, because if you consider a journal that you didn't necessarily consider in the past, it opens your work up to people that hadn't seen it in the past. I'll give you one example. Early in my career as a PhD student, when I started working on organizational sociology, authenticity, and organizational ecology, I was trained by a sociologist in a strategy department. I never thought I would publish in SMJ. Just never even considered submitting my work there. But I think, to SMJ's credit, this is back in the early 2010s, SMJ was one of the first journals to really be open to different types of studies, different methodologies. They've been at the cutting edge of accepting replication studies, or other types of studies that didn't necessarily fit the mold of what we perceive SMJ to be. Early on, everyone used to tell me, if your dependent variable is not performance, then you can't submit to SMJ. And I used to think that, and they've been increasingly open, but I would just encourage people to test those boundaries. The worst thing they can do is reject you. So why not? If you have a paper that you believe in and you think is a good paper, why not submit it somewhere that even though someone tells you it's not the right fit? You never know. Like I said, I never thought I would publish multiple papers in SMJ, and I have, and I think I'm a better researcher for it, because I can understand different audience, different readers' perspectives across these different journals, and I think it's been a net benefit publishing in a wide range of journals. Yeah, so I have some very specific advice. I started the PhD program relatively late in my life. I was already married and had kids, and so maybe this is just specific to me, but I honestly think this advice applies to others as well. And it's, treat it like a job. Treat this profession like a job. We have a huge amount of freedom and flexibility to create our own hours, to figure out when and how we want to get our work done. And it's an incredible benefit to us to be able to do that, but it's also a little bit of a burden. I think sometimes it's challenging to figure out how to be efficient and how to be effective when you have all the free time, when you don't have deadlines sitting right in front of you. So the more that you can treat it like a job, the better it's going to be. I remember when I was in the PhD program, my wife and I were having our fourth kid, and I was looking at the other PhD students who weren't married and didn't have kids, and I was a little bit jealous and thought, oh, they have it easy. And the reality of the situation, what I realized is I think it made me a better researcher, because I couldn't procrastinate. I couldn't put things off, and I used to do that all the time. And so now, even now, but particularly in the PhD program, I treated it like a job. I came in at specific hours. I worked. I tried to set very specific sort of routines. we take a lot of vacations in this profession. But when I was on vacation, I would still meet with co-authors and have meetings about projects. And so try to be as routine oriented as possible, because that freedom of time can really come back. A tenure clock is really short. 6 years seems like a long time, but it goes by very, very fast. And so your ability to manage your time is really important, I think. Another thing is, that doesn't mean that you should just spend 80 hours in your office slaving away, right? It's important to try to be efficient, to try to get work done. When you have a paper that you think is good enough, send it in. Don't wait and revise tiny little bits, because in the review process, your paper is going to get ripped up and rewritten and ripped up again and rewritten and criticized. And so I think, you don't want to waste anyone's time. You don't want to submit a paper to a journal when that paper is not ready. But once it meets the bar, it's important to get your paper out there, because again, the tenure clock is very short, and these journal processing times are very long. So I think it's really important to try to get as much experience as you can early on, navigating the review process, getting your work in, engaging in these processes. And then, I think the last piece of advice is learn to take criticism and not take it personally. You will be told repeatedly that you are not smart, that your ideas are terrible. Rejection is a part of this job, and I think it's important to not take that rejection personally and internalize it. I think it's important just to understand it's a part of the job. It's what we're trained to do as scholars. We're trained to scrutinize. We're trained to nitpick. And so the ability to emotionally detach from that criticism, I think, is a huge benefit to not only your success as a researcher, but your overall mental health and well-being, I think, is probably what I would say. So I hope my advice, I hope my answers have been helpful. Everything I've said is an N of one. It's just my personal opinion, so don't take it as being an absolute. I know you have a lot of interviews, so I would urge you to listen to all of these interviews. I listened to a few of them, and they were fantastic. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to come here and provide my perspective and my ideas about this, and best of luck.